And good evening. Welcome to Branco Broadcast. My name is Bob Branco. This evening we're featuring Carol Uphold to talk about child care, foster care, and all that goes with those issues. And Carol will give us a brief presentation, and then when she's finished, we can ask her the appropriate questions. Welcome, Carol. Glad to have you.
Yes, I'm glad to be here, and hopefully it can be of some help if anyone has any questions. I guess I can kind of start from the beginning, which was I got out of high school, out of Perkins, and went on to a junior college for any type of pediatric care, whether it be going into nursing, pediatric care, in well baby clinics, home for little wanderers, that kind of thing. And I did 1 year. Well, a 2-year course went into 1 year. I was able to do it in. And then when I got out of college, I moved up to Fitchburg, and Barry had already gotten a house. We got married, and then we belonged to a food co-op. And in the process of knowing people through the food co-op, I ended up doing nursery care. We did daycare and nursery. A friend of mine and myself got together, and we did it in the basement of our home. We had several 3-year-olds and a few 4s, and it was fun. The kids are really a delight. They're so imaginative, and they really did well. Then from there, I went into just daycare. I belonged to a co-op for daycare, and after a couple of years of that, we finally ended up going into respite care, which is in the state of Mass. If you as a parent or guardian have a child that's disabled, that parent gets to have basically time off, and in doing so, they put their child into a home. Just sometimes it's for a week, sometimes it's a day or two, but a home that specializes in dealing with children of different issues. We had kids that were developmentally slow. We had one child who ended up, if you live in Massachusetts, you might have heard about it. On Channel 5, they have an adoption program on Wednesday. It's called Wednesday's Child. And one of my little ones was adopted into that and got a nice home. And then we did add it on to that, respite care and then foster care. It was interesting. I dealt mainly with infants through toddlers. I didn't care to work with the older children. The dynamics are so different. And it's odd. People say, how can you stand having, kids all the time? And we had it 24/7. There was always more than mine in our house. And it's like, the kids are so easy to work with. It's the parents we had the most difficult time with. And that's another whole, story. It's the parents sometimes can be challenging. And then I finally, after having several children, I retired, about 4 years now. And, you learn little things along the way. We use the bells on shoes, and, we really didn't do too many other special things to keep tabs on the kids. You just kind of learn to kind of tune into them. Of course, they're never left alone, so you're kind of always there. You know what they're doing, and I guess it's just kind of for me, it was almost an instinct type of thing. I always loved taking care of young ones, and even Lucille Mahoney can vouch for that. I used to take care of her younger brother and sisters when they were little, and that was when I was about 11, 10. So I've been interested in this field for a long time, and that kind of sums it up.
All right. Does anyone have a question for Carol?
I do, yes. This is Karen. I just came in, so I didn't pick up on all of it, but I picked up on what I needed to. But the question I wanted to ask, did you find yourself becoming so attached to any of them that you wanted to adopt them?
Well, back then, the kids came in and out of the house kind of quickly. A few of them I did. I always kind of, I tried to avoid any kind of favoritism. There were a couple of kids that we would have liked to have kept. They were just, but the foster care system in the state is not, it has its issues there. It's sometimes very difficult to keep a child that's been in foster care. They put limits on you and time and all that. And a lot of my foster care work was with children that, as they got older, would need specialized care, which I didn't feel at the time I was able to adequately do it. So it's, I would say that, I kind of didn't get involved emotionally too much, although I loved them all. I can pretty much pinpoint, who did what, and a couple of kids I've seen now that they're 18. We had one boy come to the house one day and knocked on my door and said, "Hi, remember me?" And I said, "Oh, I won't mention names." I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm in a predicament. Can I come stay for a little while?" And I obviously told him he could. And I had him when he was little. And, so they do come back, or they certainly do remember their days here. Barry thumbs a lot, and sometimes he gets people to pick him up that we've had as young children or parents of young children that we've taken care of.
Do you know how many children in all that you have fostered?
Well,
I'd say hundreds.
To do actual foster care with, it was probably around somewhere between 50 and 100. The respite care, it was probably the same amount. Daycare, oh Lord, that was probably upwards of 2. I have several picture books of all the kids that I've had, and believe me, they're not little books. So I've had several.
Anyone else?
Still foster kids? Yes, this is Terry from Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Terry, you're next.
From Canada.
Yeah.
Do you still foster children?
No, not now. Not at this point, because first of all, my husband is diabetic and has Parkinson's, and so we have our medical issues now that we're getting to be in the senior class. So it really wouldn't, and it wouldn't be easy. It would be a lot more difficult. But I did it for a number of years.
Can you tell us?
This is Alan, Carol. I would be interested in the comparison between Massachusetts and Vermont in terms of caring for children or going for licensing. Here, to be a respite care worker, you take a course through the mental health program and through the Child Protective Services. It's a 2-week course that you have to take. And in order to be licensed to become a foster parent, again, through Child Protective Services, you take a switch, and it's a lot of role-playing, interaction, and dealing with every aspect of rearing children, and then you become licensed. But before that license is issued, you need to have your fingerprints, your DNA, everything analyzed to be sure that you are not a pedophile. Is Massachusetts that stringent? And how involved is CPA or CPS with your child care as you're dealing with it?
Well, I was fortunate in that when I got out of college, I did some dealing with it's now called Department for Children and Families. It used to be called DSS, which was Department of Social Services, and I don't know, they keep changing it. But fortunately, I worked with them, and coming out of college and going into that field, a lot of that stuff I had while in college. But you also have to, there is certain courses that you have to take. Obviously, you have to have CPR. You have to have also go to so many classes, so many hours of classes, and they check your background pretty well. Back then, they probably didn't do it as well as they do now. They weren't quite as strict, but I had to renew my license. I believe it was every 2 years. Now I think they do it once a year, but I'm not positive. But yeah, you have to go through different courses and whatnot. Like I said, I'm sure now they take DNA and all that. Back then they didn't know anything about it. They didn't do anything like that because it just wasn't. You figure that was back in the early 70s. So they weren't quite. They would come out and every so often and do a check on you while the children were present in your home. So they kept pretty close tabs on, what was going on. But nowadays, I think it's,
the follow-up, how much involvement did you have with parents? Did you set the guidelines for parents to see how to properly care for children so that the parents could do it, so eventually the parents could apply back through the court system or in CPS to get their children back? Did you have much involvement in helping?
When it came to foster care, you did not have anything to do with the parents. Nothing. You weren't even, you couldn't meet them. You had no access to them. All you had was you would have a caseworker, and the caseworker would work with you and the child, and then in turn decide what the real parent needs to work on and needs to do in order to better care for their children. But back then, you didn't have contact with foster parents.
So in other words, when you got school reports and, report cards, you couldn't share that with the parent or allow the parents to come and spend an afternoon to see how you dealt and communicated with the children?
Back then, no, but also back then I did not take school-age children. I started with infants, and I probably went up to probably 4 years old. I did have a couple of cases that it was very unique in that this single parent had 4 children, and she could not take care of the children properly. I reported her to the department. They, in turn, gave the children to us on a temporary basis until the mother could get a hold of her own life and get it back together. And drinking was a problem with her. So I would keep the kids until she was able to get back on her feet and get into treatment. And then the department gave the children back to her, which unfortunately she went right back into her old routine, and the children then would be put up for adoption. I did not have the opportunity to adopt the children, but at that point they were split up, which was unfortunate.
That's a shame.
All right, Joni, you're next.
Carol, did you have any problems as a blind couple? I think that you and Barry both are blind, right?
Yeah.
Did you have any bad experiences with the agency about your blindness? Did they give you a hard time?
Well, at the time, there were only 2 of us that were blind daycare providers. And the other, she lived near to Boston, and she was given a terrible time. They really were very unfair with the way they handled her case, and she ended up not continuing with foster care. As far as us, fortunately, I had a worker who was really very good. She was very willing to work with us, and she had no problem as far as the vision went. She would ask us different things and how we'd handle them and whatnot, but ultimately, I never had a problem. I was very fortunate.
That's so good.
Okay, anyone else? Steve, Don?
No, I can't think of anything.
I have a question.
I think it's Marcy work that you did, but
how many children did you have at one time?
Well, that's kind of At the time when I was doing daycare, legally, and I wasn't aware of this at the time, and I didn't even really look into it. I just took kids and whatnot. But legally, you're only supposed to take 6. The most that I would have at one time for any length of time, like say for 4, 5, 6 hours, it was probably 9 to 10. And when I ended up actually getting my license, then I went down to 6 because that's the limit you're supposed to. But basically speaking, when I first started daycare, I was in the daycare, co-op. So we would take 9 or 10 kids at a time, and that kind of thing. No one really.
And then you would put the kids in groupings of 3s.
Well, most of the time, the kids were all pretty much the same age group. It was really kind of strange. I think the most difficult time was, I think, when I had 2 sets of twins. One set was 5 months, and the other set was 14. That became challenging because, of course, you have 2 infants want to be fed at the same time. 14-month-old kids want to be fed pretty much the same time they did, and it could get a little crazy, but we dealt with it, and we really, knock on wood, I never had any injuries with my kids. I never ran into any of it. It was really quite smoothly. The other thing, of course, it's very difficult to deal with is when you have to report a parent. That becomes, that's a difficult thing because then the parents feel that you're kind of like attacking them, and you don't want them to feel that way. But sometimes you really didn't have much of a choice. So it's, pretty much that was, I have a lot of kids that were in the same age group, so it worked out pretty well.
Gary, go ahead.
Were there times when you reported a parent and you felt that they weren't doing anything to alleviate the problem?
Yeah, I did.
Because I had that experience. Mind you, ended up going to court because I didn't shut up.
Yeah, you really have to be careful on how you handle parent type of situations like that. I've had a couple parents and they were both single parents, and that they had to be reported. And fortunately, I never had to go to court. My caseworker that was working with me at the time of it saw what was going on. So she was able to observe what I was observing. So therefore, I wouldn't have to go into court, that she would be my backup, so to speak. But it's very difficult. Sighted parents really have a hard time thinking that, okay, you can't see and you're going to watch my kid better than I, type of attitude. And when you have to get a social worker involved, it's a lot easier to deal with that parent. It just, and I've had some parents that are really, I had one parent in particular who was a single parent. He had his child part-time. His girlfriend had the child for the rest of the time. They divided the week up. And unfortunately, during the time that I had the little boy, his dad was going out with a very good friend of ours. And come to find out, he ended up killing his daughter that we were friends with. And they never, and so we fought quite a bit to get the little boy so that he would not go back with them, because they never arrested him because they didn't feel they had enough evidence. And it's like,
whoa.
Yeah.
What would constitute enough evidence in their mind? Yeah, okay.
I don't know. It that's what we couldn't understand. I mean, I don't know how much they felt they needed. I thought they had enough, but I guess the police didn't. But as far as I know, he's still walking around on this earth.
Someone will get him.
Well, You've taken mostly children. I've taken 12 to 18-year-olds with my care. Did you notice much substance or drug abuse that came from birth through those children, and dealing with parents that you had to deal with substance abuse in your small kids?
Oh, yeah.
From the amount of...
Oh, that's hard.
I've had one family that she had 3 little girls, and one of the little girls had fetal alcohol syndrome, and because the mother drank quite a bit, and that, and then her other child one day came into me with her face all black and blue, and she was a mess because her mother had hit her and shoved her up against a file cabinet. And these little kids, it's terrible how kids can be treated. I don't understand, but I've had many children that have been subject to some type of thing like drugs or alcohol.
Yeah, I have seen kids come through that are heroin addicted at birth.
Conference muted.
Carol, are you still there?
Okay.
I will everybody to mute their phones, 4-star, except for the person asking the question. All right, Alan, you were speaking to Carol. You may continue.
No, all I was saying is that I have seen children coming through that are heroin addicted at birth because of the substance, and then we've had to deal with courts, social workers, and try and force the parents into counseling themselves.
Yeah, I've had I've had a couple as infants that I ended up taking from the parents and it was weird because the mother was a nurse, but she was dependent on drugs and alcohol, and her baby was he had some effects from it because he was born with some drugs in his system, but I haven't done a whole lot with I've dealt with the aftermath of the whole thing, like, it's things that have already been done that, it's, that had been reported already to whoever they have to be reported to. I just kind of took over as an intermediate type of person until the parents and the court could work it out. But
I guess the last question I have for you, Carol, is do you feel the training that you got through respite care and through the Child Protective Services adequately prepared you to deal with every aspect of what comes through your house with children?
Personally, I think so, because I was very much involved right from the beginning. Before I even went to college, I was very determined to learn as much as I could. I had children that had colostomy bags. I've had kids that have been, on breathing treatments, and, so I was taught pretty much all of that, before I ended up having to do it. And plus a lot of it was I learned as I went, too. And I think nowadays, I don't think they get enough training. I don't think when you see what's happening in the system, I don't think the foster parents really are not trained very well. I don't think they get enough of it.
Why aren't they trained very well, Carol?
I think because there's so many that need it that they don't have the time or the funding for it. Because now they don't even have respite anymore. They just put it under foster care. And so I think it's because they're just so overwhelmed with cases, and it's unfortunate because I'm sure, as all of you have heard, there's been just in this past year, several babies or young kids have died in foster care.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got to tell you something. Somebody is not teaching somebody. It's unfortunate, but I think definitely more training needs to be done.
Carol, speaking to that, here in the province of British Columbia, where I am, this is Terry again. The respite care is put on to the home support workers who are responsible, so say, for helping people take a bath or a shower and preparing meals and tidying up their apartments or homes or what have you. But no,
that doesn't
do respite care.
That you don't get through respite care in the state. I
understand that. I know. And training for foster care is just about very little.
Yes.
They have a course for social workers, and that's about it. They don't get very much training for foster care.
Right.
Going in to work with families and all that stuff. And they
right.
that very well. It's amazing,
yeah,
but again, they don't get very much.
Right. They don't. They really need to do more training.
They do.
What about compensation?
Financially? Oh, that's a joke. When I was in foster care, I got paid, I don't even remember what it was per child, but it wasn't, believe me, it wasn't a whole heck of a lot. They get a lot more now, obviously, than I had received. As far as daycare went, I was very, people were charging daycare, people were charging like $5 an hour. I would charge $2.50 because a lot of my families and I felt because of their financial status, I think that's where you end up having families with issues or difficulty handling children because they don't make a lot of money. So therefore, they end up, I think, abusing them because there's no place for them to go. There's no place to put them. They can't work because they don't make enough money to pay daycare and work. So I think, you run into a problem there. So I kept my fees very, very low because I felt that it was important to get those kids daycare that otherwise wouldn't have had.
All right, Don, you're next.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I had to leave the line for a short while. I had a little accident, but, I'm back.
Don't worry about it.
As best as I understand it, well, first of all, my hat goes off to you. But in order to do this kind of work, you have to be real dedicated. So my hat goes off to you.
I thank you. I loved my job, and that's important.
Yes, of course. Yeah, did I understand that you're retired now? Is that correct, or?
Yes. Yeah, I am.
Oh, okay. Now, how long have you been retired? I'm just curious.
Maybe 4 years. I'd say
okay.
probably around 4 years. Yeah.
Okay. And second question. You were never a foster parent, right?
Yes,
Technically, I was a foster parent. I was in with the foster parent program, and of course I took in foster kids. So I think though foster parenting today has, is a lot, it's different. You have to go through a different program that I did not have to go through because I already had it in school and I already knew it, a lot of it. But, I was certified for foster care. I'm licensed for it.
Well, for an example, Alan from Vermont, he's a foster parent, but he doesn't get involved in, in the actual care of kids, medically or anything like that.
Well, if I have a child in my foster care program, and if that child needed medical help and whatever, I always took it to the doctors. I was the one that, had to make sure that it had shots and that kind of thing. Different foster parenting in different states don't necessarily require that. Sometimes in some states, the actual social workers have to do that part of the care.
I see. But you were now. If a parent wanted daycare, that's what you did.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, very good. Very good. Again, my hat goes off to you. But that kind of work, you have to be real dedicated and.
You have to have a lot of patience, that's for sure.
Yeah,
but,
you have to like what you do, obviously. And
oh, yeah. Like I said, I've never had an injured child, never had to take a kid to the hospital for one reason or another, and I was very fortunate that I had the training I had, and I think a lot of it was instinct. I think sometimes certain types of behavior or whatever can be hereditary, and my mother loved kids. She did nursing. I did, and my daughter is now doing it. So it's like, you really have to
your
have.
daughter's doing this now.
Yeah, she does. Well, she's actually she's a nurse. She's an LPN. So it's you really have to like your job, and if you don't, you better not do it.
And I used to work in a hospital. And I know what the nurses had to go through with their schooling and. And they're on the job training, but it's rather rigorous.
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, very good. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Carol, did you have much between husbands and wives using children as pawns in their problems with their?
Oh yeah, I've been that route. Yeah, we've had a couple of families that was an issue, unfortunately. I try not to get myself into that kind of a situation because then it looks like that you're siding with the child and you're not being empathetic to the parents, which a lot of times I wasn't, but I never let them know it. But I have seen people do it. It's unfortunate, but adults will do that. And it's not a good thing. It's not healthy for the child. It usually ends up being a mess. Someone gets hurt.
Well, thank you for doing what you've done for these children. I, for one, want to applaud you and Barry for doing it.
Well, he was lucky. He worked 14 hours a day. And he'd come home and say, you know what? I wouldn't trade your job for anything. I think I'll just keep going to work. It was crazy because he'd come home and, you have kids all over the place and God knows every step you took was a toy and, it was, but he dealt with it well. He was very supportive, so I would consider myself fortunate.
I'll tell you, many weeks we had kids 7 days a week.
Oh, yeah.
Nights, daytime, it didn't make a difference.
Yeah.
That's
well, thank you for what you're doing, Barry.
Yeah, thank you very much for what you're doing.
That's dedication.
Somebody's going to do
wonderful. I don't know how you did it with all these infants at one time. I had one and it
was crazy. Yeah. And you want to, just to tell you a kind of an interesting situation, the set of twins I had that were 5 months old, my girlfriend happened to come over to the house one day, and we were lining up the babies to feed them. And so she was helping me, and she happened to get some sweet potatoes on one of the twins' nose. Well, when the mother came to pick up the kids, she didn't say anything, and she went home. And next thing I knew, I got a call from my social worker that works with me, and she said, do you know that you just got a 51A filed against you, which is a child protective thing. It means that you've done something that you shouldn't have done, and you can get in trouble with it. But I said, yeah. So she said, I said, and what did I get a 51A for? She said, because when so-and-so came to pick up her girls, they found that the little girl had sweet potatoes on her nose, and her face wasn't washed well enough. I said, first of all, I wasn't even the one to do it. It was my girlfriend who was perfectly sighted, and it just so it just, we had a laugh over that one. Of course, it was unfounded and whatnot, but it shows you, people are so quick to blame someone that they think, isn't capable for doing something, but that one always kind of stuck with me. I thought, gee.
Carol, you said that you have a daughter. Did you have any other biological children?
Yeah, I have a son who's 43 now. Oh, my word. And then my daughter, she's just turned 40, and then I have a son, 37. And then I have one of our grandchildren. We have custody of. I've had him since he's been 7 days old. And bringing up a newborn baby at 52 years old is a challenge. But we did it, and he's a good kid. He has learning disabilities, and because his mother did drugs, but he's grown up to be a good kid, so we're lucky.
Well, I also applaud you totally vehemently because I had one child, and I couldn't always manage him, so I don't know how you did it, but.
Yeah, it's crazy. It isn't an easy job,
Patience is a virtue.
Yes, it is.
It is.
Okay, maybe we'll have time for one or two more.
What was that, Terry? Did I hear?
Terry, were you going to ask a question?
I know some. I was. I've forgotten what I was going to ask.
That's
okay. Don't worry about it.
Yes.
That's old age.
Yeah,
that's called the senior moment.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. I'll take one more. Well, Carol, I guess no one has any further questions. I, too, will applaud you now.
I've enjoyed it.
It takes a lot of energy and a lot of commitment on anyone's part to do what you do. So I would say that you had those traits and assets, yourself and Barry, too. And if more and more people had that kind of patience and understanding and wisdom today in that particular job, there probably wouldn't be too many troubled kids around today. And we wouldn't have to be concerned about some of the leaders of our future.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. I'm glad I'm not having children now, or, that I'm not starting all over again. The one we have, he's turning 16 on Valentine's Day, and that's enough. I told all my grandchildren I'm not bringing up anybody else's kids.
Did you ever feel like you were being underestimated by social work?
Not that I can think of. I know there are some people that, felt, how can a blind person do that type of thing. Before I got pregnant, my neighbor across the street was an elderly man, and he made a statement one time that, blind people shouldn't have kids. And even my doctor, when I went, because I had gotten pregnant, and I went to see him, and he said to me, you have no business being pregnant. You can't see. And then next thing I knew, I don't know what he had put me on a pill, and he said I forget, it was for vitamin or whatever. At the time, I really wasn't inquisitive, but I ended up having a miscarriage, and it was a set of twins. They were both underdeveloped, and it was because of his care, what he did, that caused it. He just felt blind people shouldn't have babies. So we've been that route and dealt with that attitude quite a bit.
Well, if they only saw your kids today, they'd think twice about what they said to you.
Yeah, well, I would hope so, because
they would.
It's just it was. We had a hard time at first, but we got beyond that and had ours, and very fortunate that we did. So,
many others have survived.
Yeah.
When I was in the hospital when I had mine, I had a nurse that wouldn't let me hold him, and I said,
believe it.
"Wait a minute."
I
said, "He's my baby, and I'm going to hold him for the rest of my life, so you better give him to me, or else."
Yeah. Well, that's like when I was in the hospital with my first one. I was, they brought the baby in, and they said, "Okay, we're going to teach you how to bathe the baby and dress him." I said, "Give me the baby." And I undressed him, gave him his bath, and put him back together, and they said, "How did you know that?" I said, "You know something? I do have a brain." I said, "It's very common sense, And to me, it felt that way because I already knew so much. And, it's just funny. People, they just don't think sometimes before they speak, I think. It's unfortunate.
Well, I think a lot of new mothers don't know how.
They don't. There are, unfortunately. There's a lot of it.
Well, I didn't really know about babies. I didn't really have much to do with them.
I was going to say, if you've had no contact much with them, of course not.
So I had to learn how to change a diaper, and I got a doll to learn to change the diaper on. But then when I had my little sweetie at home, he moved around. The doll didn't, He was moving around.
That's
but I sat him down to the table.
Yeah.
It was a shocker.
I give you credit going ahead and making an effort, and I'm sure you did well with him.
Yes,
he's no worse for wear that you didn't know how to put a diaper on, believe me.
Right. Well, I lost my.
I'm still waiting to give birth to my first child.
You won't.
Yeah, well, when you do, you can give us some of your millions.
Yeah.
So you'd be the richest man in the world.
Yeah, my stepmother had the hospital call me to come down to the hospital because she was too damn lazy to do anything with her firstborn.
Is there somebody here?
I looked at him and I said, "Well, I didn't have this kid. What do you want me to do with him?" And they told me, and I said, "Okay, that's simple enough." I bathed him, I undressed him, I bathed him, I put him together again. I said, "What's so hard in that?" The nurse looked at me. She said, "Well, why are you here?" I said, "Somebody called me to come down here." in a snowstorm. I don't know why.
Yeah. Did you have any children?
I lost one.
I'm sorry. I lost a set of twins and another single baby. It's hard.
I lost very hard. I had a miscarriage, and then I lost my son when he was 24 years old.
Oh, so that's got to be awful.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, and that's something that you just never really get
over. That's hard.
No,
yeah,
you don't get over it, and
no,
you don't.
But I know that I worked very hard.
Oh, I'm
and
sure
Laura
you
knew
did.
my son, and I worked so hard to civilize him. I mean, they all have to be, to socialize him and to teach him good manners. And people used to say to him, "You're so polite."
Yeah.
And because I just drummed it in, constantly.
I have to. This is Lauren. I have to say that she did a great job with him.
Thank
and
you.
When he was little, and we used to go to dinners, he was always there to help. Remember that, Joni?
Yeah. He loved it.
He sounds like he was a good boy, I'm sure.
He was.
Do you mind me asking how you lost him?
He had a massive heart attack.
Oh.
And
it so
just
young.
Happened. Yes, 24, and it just happened so fast. It was like he had gotten married 3 months to the day before.
Oh, wow. Oh.
And those kinds of situations you can never prepare for.
No, you can't.
No, it's a bolt out of the blue.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be. He's been gone. It's going to be. I lose track. He died in 1993, so it'll be 23 years, I guess, in August.
Yeah.
And,
wow.
Oh wow.
So he'd be 46 now, and I wonder what he'd be like. But I know he would be
probably just as polite as ever, Joni.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can bet he's watching every move you're making.
I'm sorry, both of you were talking.
I'm sorry.
Let's hope he wouldn't have been a Republican, Joni.
He, who knows what he would have been. I think he might have been, though.
Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. Carol, I want to thank you again for participating.
No, not a problem.